Book TV has covered several authors talking about the history and function of the National Security Agency. In light of recent revelations about the NSA's domestic surveillance program, Book TV has put together a collection of clips from programs we've featured on the NSA and the topic of publishing government secrets. Over the next hour, we'll hear from authors James Bamford, Matthew Aid, Patrick Radden Keefe, and Dana Priest. Up first is investigative journalist and author James Bamford, whose first book about the NSA, The Puzzle Palace, was published in 1982. He spoke about the follow-up to that book, Body of Secrets, in 2002 at the Independent Institute in Oakland, California.
The NSA is an extremely secret agency. When I wrote The Puzzle Palace, it was the very first book ever written about NSA. And I never thought I'd have to write a second one, but after I wrote Puzzle Palace, nobody came along and followed in my footsteps. So I ended up writing Body of Secrets about 20 years later, which is only the second book written on NSA. So I sort of have a monopoly on that topic at this point. The government was not very happy that I wrote The Puzzle Palace, or was not very happy that I was writing The Puzzle Palace. And they twice threatened me with prosecution. Even though I never worked for NSA, I never signed any clearance forms with NSA or anything else. They just didn't like anybody writing on NSA. I mean, the old saying at NSA is that the NSA stands for no such agency. And internally, the joke is it stands for never say anything. And then when The Puzzle Palace came out, they said the joke now is it stands for not secret anymore. But it was still very secret. I barely scratched the surface. So they also were unhappy that I got documents out of a particular library down at the George C. Marshall Research Library down in Lexington, Virginia. It's on the campus of the Virginia Military Institute. So they went down to the library after the book came out, and they actually raided the library, and they began pulling off things from the shelves and ordering the archivist to lock them in vaults and so forth. This is after the book's already come out. I mean, I didn't really understand the logic of that. I mean, if you do it before the horse is out of the barn, I could see, but as a result of that, the government, as a result of the government's actions, the library, as well as the American Civil Liberties Union, the American Library Association, the American Historical Association, they all sued NSA over that, saying you shouldn't be able to go into a private library and pull out non-classified private documents. These were not government documents. These were private letters by one of the individuals that formerly worked for NSA, one of the founders of NSA, William F. Friedman. So the history of writing on NSA is not a history of ease. You have to fight the government every way. Another problem with trying to write on it is the Freedom of Information Act, which is usually a very important tool. But NSA is the only agency that's excluded from the Freedom of Information Act, little thing called Public Law 8636, subsection 6, which I know by heart. It says, Congress shall make no law requiring NSA to divulge any information about its organization, function, structure, salary, personnel, or any other information. So I had to find sort of loopholes in that Public Law 8636, and I was successful in fighting the government over a number of documents I requested. I ended up getting more than 5,000 pages worth. So the history is just a lot of hard work in trying to get anything out of this agency. When I wrote this new book, I approached the agency, and again, I got the same response. We're not going to help you. We're not going to give you any interviews or allow you in the agency or blah, blah, blah. But then a new director came along and saw the logic in allowing at least a book to be written about it. I had written The Puzzle Palace, and the world did not come to an end after that. As a matter of fact, the government ended up using the book as a textbook in the Defense Intelligence College. So, and it was really only the NSA that was going crazy. The State Department actually invited me over to give an address to the senior officials at the State Department, a thing called the Secretary of State's Open Forum, and they had me for lunch in the Secretary's dining room afterwards. At the same time, the NSA is coming after me. With this book, though, it was different. The new director came along, saw the value of having at least another book. The last one was 20 years ago when The Puzzle Palace came out. And one of the key reasons was Hollywood was creating this image of NSA as an agency full of assassins, an enemy of the state, for example. The director of operations, or the deputy director, I think it was, assassinated a congressman because of a bill he didn't like. So NSA thought that, if there was impressionable teenagers or whatever see this movie and they are interested in NSA, it might be useful to have a book that's at least accurate in the library and the bookstores. So they did agree to help me, and they let me in the door and gave me tours through the agency, interviews with senior officials, and they didn't help me with the documents, but once again I found loopholes, and I got another about, a couple thousand pages worth of documents. At the same time, the agency, when the book came out, instead of threatening me with prosecution, this time they had a book signing for me, which was very strange. I think they were originally they wanted access to the book. They wanted to have access to the book before it was published, so they could see what was in it and whether it was good or not. And I just said, having done this for 25 years, I'm not going to start now giving censorship rights to government agencies. So eventually they backed off, and they gave me the access anyway, and I never ended up giving them any advance notice, any advance copy of the book. They saw the book when everybody else got it in the bookstore. So the book's untainted by NSA's own censorship. Nevertheless, the agency, I think they realize the value of it, and I think they've appreciated the book. I think it came as a shock to everybody that they actually had a book signing. It actually went on for 4 hours up there, and originally when the Puzzle Palace came out, they had basically told all the employees they couldn't buy it and couldn't discuss it. So it was very interesting during the book signing and seeing all these employees walk up with copies of their Puzzle Palace also, which. But let me just I'd like to get into a little bit about what the agency is about, how it works, some of the issues revolving around September 11th and so forth. I'll just give a brief overview of what NSA is. Basically, as David said, it's the largest intelligence agency in the world and the most secret intelligence agency in the world. Compare it to the CIA. The CIA was formed in 1947 by the National Security Act. They had hearings, there was debate, there was nothing secret about the creation of the CIA. The NSA, however, was formed in 1952 by President Truman, and it was formed by a top-secret memorandum. And the contents of that memorandum has been secret for many years. It was just declassified in the last few years. And that memorandum laid out the parameters of this very, very secret agency. Even the name was secret. Its very existence was secret. Congress was not told about it. There were eventually about 2 people in Congress that were told about it, and that was it. Eventually the name got out because of a spy scandal and so forth. But since that time, NSA has remained extremely secret. Even today, when you hear about all these things happening with the intelligence community, you almost never read about the NSA. You read about CIA, FBI, all the other agencies, but NSA virtually never appears in the press, or very rarely appears in the press. I did, however, do a piece for the Washington Post last week in their Outlook section, a long piece on NSA's responsibility during the September 11th attacks. The agency basically grew out of World War II. World War II had the greatest successes in breaking the German and Japanese codes, and the German Enigma machine and the Japanese Purple Code. And the U.S. was in a bad position when the war was coming to an end. We're about to go to this Cold War involving Russia. The problem was Russia was our ally during World War II, so we'd never paid virtually any attention to Russian codes, with one small exception known as Venona. But there was very little attention paid to Russian code breaking. So at the end of the war, the U.S. and Britain decided they'd create this new, very secret organization known as TICOM, which even today is technically secret. The NSA